Hey everybody, today I'm changing things up with a question and answer video. So this is something a little different for me, and the questions that have been coming in lately have been falling into some very specific categories. So I realize you guys want to know more about hydrangeas, more about perennials in pots or containers, and annuals in containers, fertilizing, and then there's also some general questions about the history of our family nursery, as well as kind of my history with plants and some of my background. So today I'm going to handle the one that's probably the most awkward for me to talk about, and that's talking about myself and my family business, just because I'm more comfortable talking about plants. That comes very naturally to me. This is going to be a little bit outside that comfort zone. I am going to talk about some plants and things like that, but this is going to be a little bit different video than some of my other ones. So I'm not offended if you decide to just wait till the plant videos come back. But for this one, I'm going to just talk primarily about, I guess, the business, the history, my history, and let you guys get to know me a little better and a little bit more about what goes on, I guess, behind the scenes here. So first question comes from Donna Gent. And the question is, where in Michigan are you located? So very good place to start. We are in Posen, Michigan. This is my hometown. We're above the 45th parallel. And if we look at a map of Michigan, 45th parallel goes across the lower peninsula here. For those of you who don't know, Michigan is in two parts. We have a lower peninsula and an upper peninsula. And so we're right here at kind of the pinky finger area. So this is where the nursery is. Meanwhile, my home and where my mail gets sent is actually in the upper peninsula in Marquette County, way up here. And I love both places and I love working with the plants here. So during the season, I'm back and forth between the places. So I'm doing a little bit of juggling, but I love my home up in the Upper Peninsula. I love being down here. And so I'm willing to kind of make things happen and juggle a lot of different things to be able to do this. And it's just kind of my thing that I like to do, and I'm going to make it work for as long as I can. So that's the story there. Next question comes from Terry D. Tell us about yourself. Did your parents start the nursery? Do any other family members work there? So the history behind this, and people might be surprised to hear this, but I did not grow up in this industry, and my family didn't get into this industry, when we were like young children. My parents kind of had it as a second career. I grew up on a dairy farm. We were dairy farmers. My grandparents were dairy farmers before that as well. So come from a long line of cow milking people. And when it was probably 2007, we were on the dairy farm, and the local 4-H club, which is kind of a group for youth in agricultural areas, and they put on programs. So a lot of them are around livestock and about plants, but they also do different crafts and skill classes. Well, they had a after school class on calligraphy, and my mom desperately wanted to learn calligraphy. And so she kind of bribed me into taking the class so that I could teach her. And I didn't mind taking calligraphy because I was always interested in like graphic design and some of the art stuff. So it didn't bother me to take the class. And that became a bit of a gateway into a new arena for us. So we still had the dairy farm, doing that all the time. But after I took the class, I started teaching my mom how to do calligraphy. And I have to say, she was a terrible student. With calligraphy, you always want to pull the ink or pull the pen or the stylus or whatever I can't remember what you call the nibs anymore. You always pull them, but my mom, she always wanted to push, and she'd always get these ink splatters. Anyway, finally got her to break that habit, and she started doing a lot of calligraphy more commercially for people. So she was doing all kinds of different, poems and sayings and all that kind of stuff. And she was starting to sell that stuff. And so she started planting plants for drying that she incorporated into a lot of that work with the calligraphy. And then that led to her starting to sell dried flowers. So actually the place started as a dried flower farm. We always had a garden, we always had ornamental plants, but it was those dried flowers that kind of opened the door then to them starting to sell plants. And the history of this location, we were not always at this location. My parents bought this property when I was, I think, 1 year old. So I lived here from the age of 1 to the age of 3. And then we swapped houses with my grandparents. So we moved to the family farm as my dad, his brother, and his sister and their families took over the main farm. And my grandparents moved here, and then eventually my uncle had lived here. And then it ended up, we had to get out of farming. My family had to stop the dairy farming, or at least my dad's health wasn't in a state where he could continue doing that. So moved back here, and it happened, that would have been my freshman year in college, or right after my freshman year in college. So I came home, my parents said, don't unpack, we're moving. And so that was kind of that part of that summer, was getting everything moved over here. And that also kind of turned into making it so that in finding different ways to make money. So my mom used to bake like loads of bread, like, I don't even know, was it hundreds of loaves a day or 50 loaves a day? I don't remember. 70, I don't know. Remember how many. She'll remember how many loaves of bread she'd bake. It was homemade bread. She'd put them on a wagon, drag them to the end of the driveway, and she was selling loaves of bread at the end of the driveway. People would put money in a can. And I remember my grandmother was always fit to be tied because she's like, you can't leave a can of money out at the end of the driveway. Someone's going to steal it. And my mom always laughs because only once was the can short. Usually there was extra money in the can rather than not enough. And the day that she was short, the next day a woman came flying down the driveway and she said, I didn't have any cash on me, but I knew you were going to run out of bread. So, here's the money for the bread. So people are good people around here. And so it is kind of an interesting way to kind of bring money into the family. We were also selling things at like a kind of a consignment craft shop in the bigger town of Alpena, which isn't too far from here. We were doing all kinds of stuff. And then my mom and my sister helped out a lot with doing like art shows and craft shows with all those dried flowers. And we had a lot of dried flowers. It was pretty crazy. A lot of them being grown here, and then started selling, perennials, and the business kept growing and growing. When they first started though, my parents were told by so many people, like, you are in the middle of nowhere. No one is going to drive out to your place to buy plants. They can get plants at so many other places. There's so many, big name places on the other side of the state that they can go to. Why would they come to you? My parents just took it all in stride and said, well, we'll see. We're going to give it a try. And that was right around the time, so this would have been in the early 90s, I'm going to say, or early to mid 90s, when I think that was right around the time when the wave petunia came out. And my parents were really interested in this new petunia, and it was this really strong performing petunia. And so they started carrying it. And people at first came in and they were balking at the price. Like, you want to charge how much? And I think at that time, was it even $1 a plant? It was really inexpensive, but people were used to paying basically nothing for plants at that time. And so people really were giving them a hard time. But there were certain people that said, hey, I'm going to try this. And those people came back the next year going, I want a flat. I want as many as I can get. Then their neighbors were coming in, and that's how the business grew. And they learned very quickly that if they had a different product, or if they had a really good product, people would spend the extra money, or people would make the drive out. So they did try to keep their prices as reasonable as possible, but it was about getting people to come. And now the place has grown tremendously, and we're busy, and the people who are working here, like my parents, are still involved in the day-to-day. My sister's very involved, so she handles a lot of the growing operations and the plant care type of things, and she also manages most of the staff. So at different times we will have between 10 and probably 20 staff members here, lots in the spring, and then it peters out. So everybody's seasonal here, but that's the nature of this business. But we have some excellent employees. We're very fortunate on that front. And most of them are people who really want a seasonal job or only want a part-time type of job. So we're lucky to have those people kind of in our circle. So they help make the business very successful as well. Oh, what else do I need to tell you? Well, I guess my story though is I went to college, got a degree in graphic communication. Basically that means I like to use words and pictures to communicate or tell stories or spread information or messages. And that's what I was a graphic designer. I then moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I got a job at a science and technology museum, rather prominent one, and eventually became kind of a lead in a part of that museum that was in charge of exhibit development. So I was in charge of like the design side and the concepting side of exhibits for science and technology related type of endeavors. So a big part of my job was working with the fundraising team. I wasn't necessarily the person who was building an exhibit. I was basically creating a lot of proposals that we would present to different donors. Then a big part of my job was translating like what the donors wanted, what we wanted, and what the educational standards were, putting those into a package that would then be kind of worked with the actual people who were building the exhibits and the education team that was kind of creating educational content around those exhibits. So it was a very interesting job, and it probably was the only place that I could have learned some of the skills that I learned. I got so much out of working there, in part because one of the things that we had to do as employees is we had to teach summer camps. So I would teach a 1-week class to teenagers about design. So it would either be like a magazine design class or a digital illustration class, something like that, because we had a design studio. And so that was very interesting. So I'd be the lead educator 1 week, and then on other weeks, like probably 2 other weeks during the summer, I would be a support educator, and I would end up in the video production and the audio production classes as kind of the secondary teacher or the support teacher in those. And so I got to learn how to, the basics at least, of editing video and audio. And that was just, I guess, something, and some web design classes we also had as well. So all those things I had learned there and realized like, hey, I can do this. If I can teach a teenager to do it, why can't I? So great place to work, very interesting environment. But I did end up I left that job and actually went and worked in Australia for 6 months, because that's how long I could get a visa for. And that was a really eye-opening experience as well. Just even though it was for a short period of time, living in another country like that and finding a job and having to work, and you'd think it's an English-speaking country, but I remember the hardest thing for me was I worked at a place that would be kind of like a UPS store kind of place. And the hardest thing was answering the phone, because you have the accent thing, which you get used to that, but they would do different things with their numbers. So people would leave a message for my boss and I'd have to, jot it down. And they were, big thing there, like we would say, we just give the phone number, but they would do things like if there were 2 3s, they'd say 22 or 111 if there were 3 1s. And as soon as they said double, I would write a 2, and my brain just, it couldn't click with that. Anyway, funny how it's those strange things that you remember and that you're kind of going back to, going like, wow, I remember my brain breaking and having to be embarrassed or feeling embarrassed because I kept asking people like, oh, pardon, could you repeat your phone number again? Could you say that again? Took me forever. Anyway, I came back from that, and the museum had been in touch with me while I was gone, and they said, like, if you're interested in coming back, we would love to have you. We're building a new building, and it was like a $130 million building. And the fundraising team, we'd love to have you back. And so I said, well, I can come back, but I don't want to be like a full-time year-round employee. I want to be seasonal, because at that time also my partner Liam and I were starting to really amp up on our tours of Ireland. So in the summer, Liam would host people in Ireland and tour them around. At that point, I was starting to go over every summer, and it was becoming the type of situation where we'd be there every May, June, July. And then we would come also at different points in the off season, usually to do work on the house, sometimes to host people. And so in the end, we'd spend probably between 5 and 6 months out of the year in Ireland. And I'll be honest with you, that business was clipping along, especially like by the time we got to 2019 and 2018, they were our busiest summers ever. We were booked up the whole time. It was really nice to see the work that we were doing, how we were having success with that, because we had a 2-year wait list. And I'll tell you something, if you're in tourism and you have a 2-year wait list, you're doing something right. And so that was very exciting. But of course, then COVID came around and travel became quite difficult at that time. I mean, Ireland was locked down. We were still able to go over there, primarily because we had the property there. But we did have to go through all the hoops of all the testing, quarantine for 2 weeks in the beginning. Then they moved it down to 1, and then it was 5 days or something like that. Had to have text messages back and forth with the health services department there, confirming that we were in quarantine, and they were checking on us all the time. So it was a weird time, like it was for everybody, but it was a time when we got a lot of work done on the house. But it also was a time, though, where here at the nursery, in March is when my parents get all their plugs of annuals. So March 1st came, all the plants arrived, and there was some talk about this virus. By the end of March, though, shutdowns were in full swing. Businesses had to be closed down. My parents still qualified as an agricultural business at that point, so they were able to keep their employees coming, but they were, we did a good job of keeping everybody separated, and because nobody knew what was going on at that time with COVID. But there was a lot of concern that they wouldn't be able to open to the public, and the public wouldn't be able to arrive. So we had to figure something out. So it was probably the first week in April of 2020, I came down. I was at my house in the UP, the Upper Peninsula, but that's what we call it, the UP. People who live up there are Upers. Sorry for those of you who aren't familiar with Michigan's vernacular. And so I came down, and in probably about 4 days, put almost 400 plants online, worked out a whole pickup system and all that kind of stuff, so we could do, no touch, no contact pickup if people wanted it, because we had no idea if we'd be open. And so we cared for those orders up until I think it was like May 20 something, people could come pick them up. And by that point we were allowed to open. So people were able to come in, but they're all, you know, do we have to wear masks, not wear masks? It was, you know, you remember those days. It was crazy. And so, but it ended up being very successful. So we have now since continued doing these pre-orders for people. People loved the fact that they could get whatever they wanted and we would take care of it to a certain point. And then, you know, so they kind of got first pick. So we've continued to do that, but it, you know, it's one of those things, like, it's definitely a service for our community, because when you add up all the hours and all the work that goes into it, we're probably not making too much money off those. I mean, we're paying for the plants and making some money, but we're not making a huge profit on those, but that's okay. People like it. And so at this point, we're going to keep it going. So that's kind of how I got pulled back into the business. And I've been involved in the business, but it was all on my breaks or when I came home and those kind of things. So I was never involved in the day-to-day. So today, one of my biggest roles in the job that I love the most is I do a lot of the research in what new varieties we're going to be carrying and what our inventory is going to be. So I do a lot of the ordering. That means I get to go to the trial gardens, which that's probably my favorite time of year. And it's 3 weeks away when I can start going to trial gardens. And it's just very nice to be able to see these plants growing and see them in person. It has completely changed how we choose our plants and what we're going to carry. So often there's a plant that if we had just seen pictures, we never would have carried it. And it's become a bestseller for us because we saw it in a trial garden. There are other plants that I've been like, no way, not going near that one. Saw it in 3 trial gardens and it didn't do well in any of them. But based on the photos and by the descriptions, we probably would have been carrying it and would have been disappointed. So that's kind of what I do there. I also do a lot of the ordering for other things like, you know, fertilizers, and I help with the pots. We all work together on that. So there's no one who makes every decision on that. We do collaborate and sometimes it's, I'm not going to say it's consensus because we all kind of trust each other. So if someone feels strongly about us carrying something, usually people are like, okay, that's fine, we'll carry that. Or if someone feels very strongly about us not carrying a plant or a product, then, you know, we'll knock that one off the list. That's kind of how we operate. Our family's pretty casual that way. And we do all trust each other. And everybody in my family tends to have pretty good instinct when it comes to plants and planting and growing stuff. So we all have pretty good faith in each other. So it's also, the ordering is a job that I can do while I'm on the road because I have other things that I'm doing, even though we're not taking guests in Ireland right now. And we're not really able to do that right now because if you've been watching my videos, you've met my mother-in-law, Pat. She helped me with a lot of the seeds this season. She is 90 years old and her health is declining. She has been put on hospice. She's doing very well though, and she's still a joy to be around, but there is a lot of physical deterioration happening. So going away for 3 months at a time, not even something we're considering. And so that also really puts a lot more value on these projects that I'm doing around the house because I really want that environment to be beautiful for her and also for Liam and for his sister, because they're the primary caretakers, and I want them to just have a little oasis because they don't get to get out of the house that much. They're you know, doing 24-hour care, and it's a lot, and I want them to be able to have kind of a nice place to be. And also I can tell, like, it's really important to Pat to know that that house is going to be taken care of after she's gone. Because she has lived there since basically she was married. She raised her entire family there, and then we purchased it from her and she lives with us. And I think, like, when she saw the front yard and the planting that was out there, I could tell it really did take her breath away, and that, you know, made it really worthwhile. It made it really nice that I was able to do that. We haven't been able to take her around to see the hydrangea hideaway yet because getting her back there is a little tricky physically, but we have a lot of plants on the back deck as well. So she will get her back there, but, you know, we've got to time it right when her energy's up and when she's feeling up for it. So, sorry, that got a little heavy there. So let me move on to the next question. So Jessica Ice had asked, what do you do at the nursery? I've been wondering that. So I think I covered that in a general way. Terry D also has another question. What do you do with all the mixed containers that you put together on your videos? So I've been keeping them in a bit of a hideaway away from the public because it is tricky when you have this retail space putting stuff that's not for sale. People can get a little ornery when they see it and they they can't buy it. So what I have been doing is some of the planters that I've shown you the updates on, I've moved out into the public area and I have put a price tag on them. But I put a premium price tag because number one, I've been babying those plants in a way that we don't baby our regular containers. I've been hand fertilizing because with our regular containers that we have for the public, our fertilizer, we fertilize in the water and then we water it in that way. I've been not using that water. I've been hand fertilizing them. I'm doing my own trimming on those. I'm not having staff take care of those at all. So I feel like those have gotten some special attention and they're also spectacular looking. They don't get regular standard pricing. They get special YouTube video superstar pricing. And so they are a little higher. And I'll be okay if somebody sells them. And there's a kind of a weird window right now, you know, because we're in July. Starting August 1st, I'm going to be on the road a lot. So I won't be around to do that extra care and take care of them. And it doesn't make sense for us to be paying somebody to take special care of something that's not going to be sold. So I'll be okay with them if they sell in the next couple weeks or so. And I do have plans to do a lot of update videos so that you guys can see them all before they go. I'd love to be able to have them all right until September so you can see what they look like right at the end of the season. But financially, that's not necessarily an option. I can't warrant like just having them tucked away in some dark corner. Well, I shouldn't say dark, bright corner in the greenhouse when they could be helping support the business, because the nursery itself is not front and center of my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel actually, it's just a backdrop, and I'm very lucky that my parents allow me to record here, and they do provide me with a lot of the plants, or at least discounts on the plants that I use. They didn't charge me at this point for any of the annuals because that I put in containers, because the thinking is that I will be selling those, and that that'll go to that, because there are thousands and thousands of dollars worth of plants in those containers, and none of that is free. So I do have to keep that in mind, and I want to be really respectful because my parents have been very supportive of this channel, and I don't want to kind of push it to where I'm always taking and not giving back to the business, because this business is really important to our family. So I should also mention, like, my nephew's become more involved in regular operations as well. So he's here a couple days a week helping out a lot as well. So it really is a family operation. My Uncle Doug, who he used to live here, and he used to milk cows for us. So from, I think, second grade until I graduated high school, almost every weekday I spent with Uncle Doug milking cows. And so it's really nice to be having him around because he works on weekends. Working with him again, I mean, it's like, he's just, I don't know, anybody who meets my Uncle Doug likes my Uncle Doug. And if you were one of his nieces or nephews, and now if you're one of his grandniece and nephews, he always makes every single one of you feel like you're the most important person in the world and like you're his favorite. He's one of those kind of uncles. And so we're really lucky to have an Uncle Doug. I hope you have an Uncle Doug. You can't have mine, although we do share him. Everybody calls him Uncle Doug, no matter who meets him, who works here. He's Uncle Doug to everybody. Okay, next one is, this question is from Butch's daughter. And this is the question that when I read it, it has really stuck with me. I've been thinking about it a lot for the last week, ever since it came in. So let me give you the gist of it. So, not sure how to put this into words, but here it goes. I love flowers and want my landscaping to look beautiful, but how do you start from square one with no knowledge? I'm not great with watering every day in the summer. How can I do a good job, learn, and not be an all or nothing flower girl? She has a little smiley face next to that. I've been operating under trial and error for years, but still feel incompetent and stressed and pressured to water when I don't feel like it. I know I've wasted so much money that way. Excited to watch all your videos and learn from you. Thank you. This is one of those things where I'm really tuned into this because I think there's a lot of people out there who feel this way. It's like you're tired of just throwing money out there, but you also don't have the ability to be able to like really zero in and spend tons of time on something. So you need, I don't know, you want to have all the spectacularness, or you want to have some success, but it's just overwhelming. And everybody's going to have a different approach to how to make that happen. But I feel like my style maybe is better for people like you because I'm a lot more casual, and I'm okay with just trying things, and I'm also not someone who feels like we have to solve all the problems of our yard today. So stop thinking about landscaping. I mean, you can have it in the back of your mind, but landscaping really takes into consideration everything about your property and all the different angles and all that kind of stuff. And that's where it gets overwhelming. And if you try to landscape, even if you're just landscaping the front yard, that can just overdo it for you, and it can be very hard to take care of. So my way of doing it is this is especially true that I've done in Ireland, because that whole property was pretty overwhelming for me, because it's like everything looked rough, and how do I get little spots? And that's what I did, is I said, let's zero in, and right now I'm only focusing on this area. And sometimes you have to, I'm going to say, look outward. So it's like, what do other people see? What do I want other people to see? And sometimes you need to look inward and say, what do I need, or what do I want this to do for me? So when you're thinking of like the outward stuff, usually it's like, what do people see from the road? What do they see as they drive in the driveway? What do they see when they come either in the front door or the side door? If that's important to you, that you want to have that nice curb appeal or that handshake when people arrive at your house, focus on that. It's a great way to do it. So if you're doing annuals, you know, just get 2 containers and start there. And like if you're doing annuals, I'd say stick to the super easy plants, the ones that are really low maintenance, the ones that can handle it if you miss watering. The ones that I would recommend, I'd say like geraniums, portulaca, that's also called purslane, scaevola, lantana, and probably coleus. Like that's 5 right there. If you just stick to those 5. So when you go to the garden center, do not look at the petunias, the calibrachoas, the verbena. Those can be a little bit fussier. Go with those 5, and that's all you do, is put those in there and make it work. Now there are other easy plants, and there's plenty of other things you can stick in there. Trailing mizu would be the other one. Boy, that one's easy. And so is lemon coral sedum. Okay, look at what I'm doing. I'm suddenly turning my list of 5 into a list of 7, which becomes a list of 10. It's too much. 5 plants. Just go in there, even 3. Even if you stick to 3 of those, pick 3, make it work, and focus on that area and try to have success with that. Now, if you're looking at perennials, that might be, you know, whatever easy perennials are in your area, and that's going to be different no matter where you're at. Even like within Michigan here, different locations are going to have different needs. So go to a local garden center that's really reputable. Tell them, I just want to know what the 3 easiest plants to grow up here, and especially ones that aren't going to require a lot of water. Like, I love when people come in and give me like a criteria, like I have full sun or I have a lot of shade, whichever one, you know, it is. I need to just know 3 plants. What would be 3 plants? Because if you go in there and just say, what do you have that's easy care? Well, suddenly you have a list of 20 plants, and they're not all going to be right for what you need. And I think it just complicates things. Now, when you're looking for those things that are going to be more rewarding to you, it might be like, what can I do in that corner of the yard that's going to give me a place that I can just sit down on a bench, read a book, and just calm down for the day? It might be like, these are going to be containers on or plantings around my deck, because that's where my family spends a lot of time in the evenings and on the weekends. It might be like what's right outside your kitchen window when you're washing dishes. You want to be able to look out every time you're washing dishes and see something that makes you smile or brings you some joy. That's the other side of it. So you can think about, like I said, the outward stuff, like what other people see, but not a bad idea to zero in on what you see. I think that might actually take that pressure off as well. Stop worrying about the front yard. Yeah, sure, your house might look like a haunted house or a derelict house from the front, but hey, you have your oasis in the back or on the side or wherever it might be, and that's what's important right now. Eventually you can work on that front. You can get around to that. It'll be okay. You know, as you get more confidence and as you start finding these plants that are easier for you to grow, I think you can start then expanding on that. And a lot of these perennials too, like once you put them in, they're pretty low maintenance, and you just have to tell yourself, like, I'm going to spend, say, 2 hours a month on these. So in the spring, I'm going to do a cleanup. I'm going to make sure that I double check them for water a couple times, maybe once or twice a week if I need to. But a lot of perennials, you don't need any supplemental water once they're established. So that can be not such a big deal. And then maybe clean up, you know, somewhere in between there. Yeah, I'm kind of throwing these numbers out. It's going to be different based on what you choose and your climate and all that kind of stuff. But that's where I would go with it. And I hope hearing that is reassuring to you. Just give yourself permission to not have to landscape and not have to put a lot in. And I will say, shrubs and flowering shrubs probably are the easiest. So if you really need to like make it so that it's not a case of like, I need to be able to know in the month of July, I'm not going to do anything. Putting in shrubs, whatever they might be, and talking at your nursery to them, you know, what are the 3 shrubs that you put in that once they're established? And remember, I am saying once they're established. So There are very few plants that you can just put in the ground and forget them. Once their roots are established, a lot of the plants are going to do really well. And then if you just give them a little bit of fertilizer and then just make sure that they're never totally drying out unless they're a really extreme drought tolerant plant, you'll have a lot of success too. So there's a lot of different directions you can go. So you could go annuals and then you'll be doing that work every year. You could go with perennials and those tend to die back and they do require maybe a little bit of extra care. Or you can do shrubs that minimal maintenance. You might have to do a little pruning once a year, but that's about it. It can work. You can make it work. So hopefully this is helpful. I really hope so. I really feel like there's probably a lot of people out there who are having that feeling. So keep watching the videos too. Hopefully something will click and it'll be the right thing for you. Okay, this last one is more of one that really made me feel good, and that's why I want to talk about it, because it really is my motivation for doing these videos and being here, and it's from Jessica Keaton. And I have to say, Jessica, thank you for this. And there's been a lot of wonderful comments that you guys have left. Jessica's is just one of many, and she has, there's some common themes that I really appreciate. And I do appreciate that you guys are watching these and looking forward to them and that you're getting something useful out of them. But Jessica wrote, I truly hope you know what an impact you have on us as gardeners. I bought a hanging basket years ago and it failed. Because of you, I know it was because the nursery put too many plants in the basket and I didn't water it enough. It discouraged me from doing hanging baskets for years, and I just stuck to the gardens. This year I made a list of petunias, calibrachoas, and other plants you've done in videos. I now have 25 hanging baskets. Jessica, you've gone overboard, but hey, I understand the addiction. And I fertilize and water them and do maintenance on them on a regular schedule. I've had so many compliments from my neighbors and community members that walk by. I tell anyone who will listen that I learned everything from you. Jessica, you're doing all the work. I just kind of gave you the framework to work in, but you are doing all the work. You have made me, and I'm sure many others, feel confident with baskets and planters because of the education you provide. I also love that I have found my people. You know, the ones who always have plants follow them home, and that's true. I mean, that happens to me all the time. Thank you for sharing your love and education of plants with us. Please keep it up. I've already begun making my list of flowers that I'd like to try next year from your videos. I not only love that Jessica has become kind of a cheerleader for me, I appreciate that, it does make me feel good, but I have a feeling that Jessica's also going to become an educator to her neighbors and her friends and family and her community with her plants, because people are going to ask her and she's going to say, you know what? The real secret is fertilizing. Like that's, I think, the biggest thing that people don't understand when they buy those containers, from different stores and things like that. They don't do any fertilizing and they don't know why they didn't do well. But then she also mentioned, like, sometimes when you buy a mixed container from a big box store, it's really packed with plants, and if you don't put it in a bigger container, it doesn't really do well. So I like the fact that maybe I am kind of doing things that are going to spread, and it doesn't have to come from my mouth. It can come from yours. So I do encourage you, like, if you learn secrets about how to make things work and someone asks you about them, tell them exactly what you're doing, because I think that's going to be really valuable to people, and it's going to help them be successful. Because that's been where, like, every video I do, I'm always thinking, like, what do I need to tell these people that will make them have success? Because the more success you have, the more enjoyment you're going to get out of what you're doing, and the better your environment and the better your plants are going to be. So, okay, I think I've covered plenty here in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit more about me, maybe my philosophies, and thank you to everybody who's been leaving comments. I'm sorry I didn't get every kind of question out there, but I am trying to answer as many questions as I can in the comments, but also I will be talking about some of these questions in upcoming videos as well. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys all very, very soon.